David Sunsop joined by Tom Wistrcill in part two of our conversation to recap the NCAA convention. And when we talked a couple weeks ago, you said cost of attendance would be the big issue. And that's exactly what happened. It was passed 79-1 by the Power 5 schools. The only school that voted against it was Boston College. So how does this change the landscape of college athletics?
Well, it certainly does, and it's a big step for the student athletes, and it's the right step for all student athletes at the Division I level, and certainly those that are on a full ride scholarship, for us to be able to provide additional resources to them. And it's called permissive legislation. So essentially the Power 5 conferences passed the legislation, and the other 5 conferences, of which the MAC is one and of which the University of Akron is part of that, has the option to now adopt that legislation without a formal vote. And so it's a great step forward to, like I said, to provide more resources to our student athletes. And now it's up to each school to make the decision of how they're going to fund it and to what level, and to work with financial aid offices, and just to make sure it all fits together.
You guys are going to adopt the legislation, so what's this effect going to be like for Akron?
Well, I think, like I said, I think the biggest impact it makes is putting additional dollars into our student athletes for their use. Especially those student athletes that are living off campus, that have expenses, that are, they're paying for their housing, they're paying for their food, they want to get some clothes and that type of stuff. So providing an extra, $100, $150, $200 a month for them to spend is a step in the right direction.
Student athletes were involved at the NCAA convention for the first time. What was it like to have them there and just their input?
Well, it was great. I was part of a couple of sessions where they got up on the microphone and spoke, and whenever they speak, it's always very meaningful. And then, as part of the NCAA Council, we had our first meeting, and I'm the Mid-American Conference representative on the council. And so we had 2 student athletes there at the council meeting with us. One of them is a student athlete in the MAC who's a men's soccer player at Northern Illinois, and it was great to have a dialogue and listen to them talk about kind of what their needs are as student athletes, and also what they don't want. So it was great having them there. It felt very natural. I think we all interact with student athletes so much on our own campus. It was very natural having them there, and I think it's only going to enhance what the end product is.
What were some of the things that student athletes want to see and some things that they don't need that were brought up at the convention?
Well, interesting enough, I think cost of attendance is important to them, the additional resources that come in. I thought the part that was most interesting was that the student athletes were against essentially the guaranteed 4-year scholarships no matter what. The student athletes that spoke up said, in layman's terms, that sometimes there is dead weight on the team, and that student athlete needs to go. They need to go somewhere else, and they don't want to be held back with their own team, with their own individual performance, because of some dead weight on the team. So, which was kind of contradictory to, I think, what everyone was thinking there. So it was great that they were able to share their voice, and they were heard loud and clear, no doubt about that.
Cost of attendance and prohibiting the removal of scholarships for athletic performance were 2 big topics during the 4-day convention. What's the next step for the Power 5 conferences and the other conferences?
Well, the next step together is the NCAA Council, again, which I'm a part of. We have to get some strict definitions into how cost of attendance is going to be applied to all sports. I think it's easy in sports like football and basketball how those are going to be applied. But the question now is, when you take track and field and softball and baseball and sports that are equivalency sports, where you're spreading that money amongst many student athletes that aren't on a full ride. So next step is we have to dig into that cost of attendance, see how it's going to affect them. And then after that, they passed 5 proposals. The autonomous group did, those 5 conferences. And so they have to decide what's next for them. Are there other things that they want to do over the next legislative cycle, or do they want to see how these kind of filter into the membership and how we all work out our differences there?
The NCAA convention took place in National Harbor, Maryland, just outside of Washington, D.C. I know you were busy during the convention, but if you had any free time, did you get to explore any of the monuments?
I didn't have any time to do that. I had dinner with some friends, some of the other ADs around the country. We had a beautiful hotel there, so actually the windows kind of near my room looked out over. You could see the mall and the Washington Monument and all of that off in the distance. So that was about the closest I got to any historical monuments this trip.
Nice to have a great view from your hotel room. Tom, thanks so much for joining me, and we look forward to speaking with you again soon.
All right, it's great. Thanks for having me.